All right, in today's episode, we sit down with Tim Henry. Tim spent 18 years in the Army as a SERE Specialist. He was blown up by an IED while overseas on deployment, and he worked his way back from being in a wheelchair to competing in CrossFit. Stellar individual, and he is all about building community. Great podcast. Let's go. Hey, welcome to the North Idaho Experience, a podcast for the people of North Idaho and those who are North Idaho curious. These are the stories of people who call North Idaho home. If you guys are thinking about making North Idaho home, give our real estate team a call, text, or email. We are all former first responders and or veterans, and we specialize in helping conservative families, emphasis on conservative, move to North Idaho. So special guest today, Tim Henry, former Air Force. You were a SERE Specialist. SERE Specialist. Okay, so I just learned that this morning.
I got so many questions.
Oh, there's a lot of questions. So,
he never tells me who we have on because he always likes my face when I find out what we're going to talk about.
What?
Oh, like, all right, cool.
Yeah, so 18 years?
Yeah, 18 years I was medically retired.
Okay, we're going to get into all that. Tim and I met at a gun shop. I meet dudes in the sauna and the gun shop, and that's pretty much it.
The sauna's weird.
It is weird, I know. But
North Idaho Arms, that's a better spot to meet than the sauna.
That is. We were both at North Idaho Arms. Our mutual friend BZ was like, yo, you guys need to connect. And then, the bald.
Maybe we can get him put a sauna in North Idaho Arms. Be a little bit less weird.
Yeah. With the guns?
With guns?
So we can sweat. Everybody be half-masted.
Clean guns and sweat. That'd be a strange thing.
Yeah. Gun grease, gun oil.
Yes.
But we met, and then I don't know, 2 days later, we had this Ruck march going on. I invited you and you showed up, and I was like, that's freaking cool, man. And then I realized that you are all about the community. You've got a crazy backstory that we're going to get into, but you're really community focused, and that's something that is near and dear to our hearts as well. And you're focused on the veteran community and the community as a whole, which is fantastic. So give us the backstory. 18 years as a SERE Specialist. So if I ask you to go cold plunging, you'd be like, fool, I done did that.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it anymore.
I mean, I would go.
Okay, good. Yeah.
it would be hands in. I'd walk in and be like, this is boring.
You need to be punching me in the face or something while I do this.
I mean, it'd have to be really cold because they take us up to Alaska and everything else. And it's, prior to being SERE, I started out in the Air Force back in 99 as a bomb builder. And I was lied to by the recruiter just like everybody else.
Freaking recruiters. Dude.
I was showing the sweet pictures of explosions and planes, and it was like, yeah, you could totally do this and work out. You're working with the planes. I'm pretty sure the only time I ever saw a plane was when I was taking something off of it, or handing it to somebody else to put on it.
So you're literally in a warehouse somewhere just assembling bombs?
Yeah. We would assemble them, test them, put them together, move one crate, move the crates around.
It's not super sexy.
No, not at all. Driving forklifts. And I was like, okay, cool. So did that for a couple years, and then a neighbor of mine was a SERE guy, and he was working with combat controllers. We were down at headquarters Air Force Special Operations down in Florida, and I was like, man, this sounds way more fun. And I had deployed a couple times already as a bomb builder, and then he's like,
was that MacDill Air Force Base?
No, Hurlburt Field.
Okay.
It's up in the Panhandle near Eglin Air Force Base, in between Pensacola Beach and Panama City, kind of right in the middle.
Oh, okay. Florida Panhandle.
Yeah, Florida Panhandle.
I was like, those towns aren't in North Idaho. What are you talking about?
Florida Panhandle.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it wasn't sexy, wasn't high speed at all. No, really no talent required besides maybe some good mechanical knowledge, and you got a little bit of grunt muscle behind you to lift stuff.
Is there when you send one of those little babies off to do their job, you give a little pat? Give a little kiss,
we would write stuff
some shit on it.
Yeah, or you give these, so you would give the munitions to the armorers. They would put it up on the plane, and they give you kind of like our chamber safe flags. They give you all the remove before flight flags, that you've probably seen around before. They just give you them in a big handful, and then we would take them back to reuse them on other munitions. But then it kind of, when you're in a wartime situation, you're like, oh, that's cool. I literally just gave you like 10,000 pounds worth of munitions.
Yes.
And you're handing me back like 20 little flags, and those bombs aren't coming back.
No.
Right.
You know, so that, I was like, cool, that's also less work, but then that's also like the impact, you know, in whatever mission we're doing over there.
Right. Those bombs are ending up somewhere.
Right,
And someone's
exactly.
paying the price.
What each flag represents.
Yes.
Right,
They hand it back,
exactly.
you're like, oh, all right.
So
Yeah.
when you're stateside and you're just dusting and moving things around and testing it, you don't feel that, you know, that same emotion or that response, because it's really monotonous. But then when you deploy and all of that stuff goes, you know, up under carriage and then it doesn't come back, you're like, sweet, okay, now I can kind of see, because I was younger 20s then, and I'm like, okay, now I can see I'm kind of making an impact a little bit, you know, but it still wasn't what I wanted. So I met, you know, some guys that were a little more high speed, working with special tactics units down there, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I don't quite want to go full frontline door kicker, but you know, maybe somewhere in the back, I'll give that a shot. So I just did a bunch of training, got in with some combat controllers that were helping me out, make sure I was fit, because you have to assess, you have to train. That, you know, it's not like you can just, I want to do this and I want to go. So they put you through like this is all dated information, so things may have changed now, but when I went through, it was a 3-week test program down in Texas, and they test you physically, mentally, task saturate you, sleep deprive you. You know, you're doing rucks with 75 pounds plus on, water stuff, you know, and then they give you like what at the time what seems like meaningless tasks, like, here, sew a sleeping bag out of parachute material at 2 a.m. next to a fire. By the way, you need to have this done before we come back in the morning. You know, so you either choose sleep or you choose to accomplish the task that you were given. And everybody usually chooses the task, and then you pass out at some point, you know, mid-task, and then you come in and you get wrecked for not having things done.
Sounds about right.
Yeah,
Set you up for failure. Yes.
yeah, exactly. But it's how you respond, you know, and thankfully I was a little bit older than some of the guys that were there, and you know that it's more of a test. And, you know, so you do really well. You get through that selection process, then they send you up to Fairchild over in Washington, you know, right outside Spokane. And then you're waiting for a tech school to start there. And that's anywhere between 6 months to a year of you waiting, because the tech school itself is 6 months long. So if you get sent up kind of right in the middle, you might be waiting. So you're kind of in like student status where you're just working and helping out, you know, the group or the squadron that's there. And then you're either a summer class or a winter class, and there's a lot of debate on who's tougher and what's more fun, you know, because if you're a summer class, you start in the summer and you finish your training like in December.
Yeah.
So you've acquired all of your skills, then there's 7 feet of snow out there.
I think that's universal
Yeah.
on whatever school, like academy, whatever you go to,
Yeah.
right? The summer and the winter class. Because we had that. I went to the CHP Academy, which was a live-in academy, and I started in October. So we were like the winter class.
Yeah.
And it just rains, right? It doesn't snow there, right?
Uh-huh.
So
Right.
you're out at the range, and you know, the range instructor's like, all right, you're gonna prone out in this puddle.
Of course.
Just disregard that it's raining, and you know, we're gonna be shooting the AR-15 or whatever. And it's like, all right, yeah.
exactly.
So then the summertime guys, you're like, whatever, dude.
Yeah, but summertime, it's
It's
blazing
It's
hot.
115
You're
degrees. Yes.
sweating your ass
That's
off.
the challenge,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I would actually prefer the wintertime, especially
Right.
in that situation.
Yeah, it's a fun argument to be said either way. I think it's just like the camaraderie between all the branches of service, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, everybody, Air Force, I get it.
Yeah.
You know, 95% of the Air Force is not, you know, operational, so we deserve that.
Those are the number one jokes.
Right, exactly. So
But
you get it all the time.
I almost said something about a 5-star hotel, but maybe a little early in the podcast.
Now, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm going to take those. We
Yeah.
actually have, there's rules and regulations about how much square footage you have to have in the Air Force.
Dude, I had to share a rack with another dude, not at the same time, but it was hot racking.
There's that moment in passing though. I mean, how do you know?
like ships in the night, dude.
Yeah.
You just pretend like it doesn't
you go
happen.
high, I'll go low.
Yeah,
just
something like
slide
that.
across each other. Is that how you do
Yep.
it?
Port and starboard is
Yeah.
what we prefer.
It's, yeah.
Forward and aft.
Got to throw ship terms in there.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, it's fun. I was a summer class. for those winter classes out there that are listening. Summer classes is way better.
Yeah.
You start out when it's hot, so it's, both of them are tougher in their own right. The winter class, you're brand new to the whole thing, and you show up and there's 7 feet of snow up there, and you're up in Colville, over in northeastern Washington, maybe 25 miles south of the Canadian border, and you're at the beginning of your training, and they usually lose a lot of their guys really early, because you might start with, like, say, 50, 60 people in your class, and usually by the end you're down in the low 20s, and they've had classes 5-10 years ago where like 2 graduated and 0 graduated. But then big Air Force comes in and was like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, we need people to graduate. But you don't really want to lower the standard.
Right.
But that's kind of a thing probably all over our country that you could do a whole nother podcast on about.
It's a common theme.
Right. The standards are getting lowered.
It's public safety, military, common theme.
Law enforcement's
100%.
big. Because what do you do in cities like Minneapolis where they just appointed the first civilian to oversee their department? It's great. Highest ranking
what?
civilian. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That was
like
yesterday. But how do you attract officers to that job, and then what's the quality of the officer that you're going to get? So even if they fail, you run into that all the time. So I know the military's done that, and what are they going to do over the last 4 years when the numbers have gone down and they need people graduating these? My buddy that's in recruiting, when I got in, it was the 35 ASVAB in order to get in the military. A couple of years ago, it was 10.
Is that like, I don't know the ranking, but
I don't know how you tied your own shoes.
It's
coming
that
in.
bad?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty bad. So I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Well, and that's like, the Air Force, like if somebody comes in, talks to the Air Force recruiter, and, they've got a low ASVAB score or neck tattoos or something like that, they'd be like,
Army.
go talk to the Army guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is it's just different missions. But anyway, long story short, just retrained up here into SERE and then loved it. It's more of an instructor role here when you're stateside. So it's SERE, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. And then for people that are local, I'm sure there's a lot of rumors they've heard about the things that happen on the base. So won't go too far into a lot of that stuff, but there's no broken bones. That's like a big rumor. People are like, they get to break 2 fingers. That's just ridiculous. The Air Force just spent how many millions of dollars training a pilot, and now we're going to break your hands. So none of that stuff's true. There's it's not a fun school for the air crew that have to go through that. It's usually about a week of academics, a week in the field, and then it's a week in resistance training. And that includes, resistance training and some escape tactics. And that stuff kind of changes and goes ebbs and flows with whatever we're hearing or intelligence is telling us from overseas, like whatever they're using or, I guess whatever tactics they're using, we kind of try to adapt here.
So there's like
a taste.
There's like a mental component. There's
Absolutely.
a, so I mean, are you putting them, I don't want you to give anything away, but are you putting them in a scenario where, you guys are the bad guys, and it's very realistic.
Yeah, it's just a simulated wartime environment.
Okay.
And then it's all on a role play situation, and it's very safe. There's doctors watching, there's cameras watching everything. So it's very safe. And we try to make it as real as we can, in training. And then, there's academic learning behind that. And we tell them, this is what you did wrong. This is what you can improve. But obviously a lot of that's very difficult to say, like, this is how you get 100% when you get captured overseas.
Right.
Like, this is just kind of like we're taking a collection of knowledge from, Vietnam all the way to now, Vietnam era, Cold War, GWAT, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, all of that. We're taking like, well, this is kind of what happened to Americans as they were captured or rolled up. This is what you could see. So it's a very abbreviated course of what they could do. And it's not designed to make people fail. It is a success course where, yes, we want you to fail in the beginning, but then we want to teach you things, and then we want you to succeed, to build that confidence. Whether it's in the woods navigating, because how many of these people use map and compass to navigate? Or have built a shelter or, prepared an animal.
Right.
You know, and the animals, again, is more of like an academic thing. We can't take down a whole bunch of deer and elk every time we're out there with students. So it's more of a learning environment where we bring rabbits, chickens, ducks, cows. Sometimes just depends on the size of the class.
Yeah.
And this is just a representation of, you know, hey, if you were out there and you had to catch something or kill something because, you know, you might have a sidearm, you might have your AR, you might have nothing. It just kind of depends on the situation of how you're crashed, you're on foot, you've escaped, you know, maybe your convoy got wrecked up and you're just running towards the mountains. You might not have anything.
Yeah.
So we just kind of introduce them to the uncomfortability of sleeping when it's cold out, hiking and navigating in places where you don't want to be, eating flora and fauna, you know, and insects, and just trying to get them that, like, hey, you can do this. You know, it's kind of like, you know, I reference a lot of life stuff to like the gym. Once you hit that weight, you know, you do you know, a 225 bench one time. The next time you approach it totally different. You're like, oh, I got this.
Yep.
Now 230 is scary. You know, 235 is scary. You know, so we give them the confidence. So we have all of these academic things we have them do. And then that's just so in that situation. And hopefully all of these skills they never have to use. You know? That's obviously the main goal. But in that situation, when they do have to use it, they're like, okay, I can eat these bugs, or I know poisonous characteristics to look for in plants. I'm going to try to avoid this because some SERE guy 10 years ago taught me, you know, avoid white and yellow berries, avoid milky sap, do a test on your skin first before you test it, you know, ingest it. So there's all these different tests and things that we do with them just to give them enough confidence to be comfortable in that environment so they can focus on what's really important, which will most likely be navigation and communication.
What's the thing that gets most people
in the school, in the training environment? Well, the resistance training gets everybody, but I would say in the woods, it's probably the food, like you know, make them eat a worm or a bug or some gross plant. You know, we have plants out there that are edible and safe, but they taste terrible. So there's no better way to lose the trust of your students than giving them a plant that tastes terrible. You know, you're like, oh, dig this up. And you just make up some kind of story, you know, like, oh, yeah, the Indians used it for this, this, this. And, you know it's safe and it's not going to harm them. But as soon as they taste it, it's terrible.
It's bitter sometimes.
Yeah, super bitter, you know, dries out their mouth and then just forces them to just chug water out of their canteen. But, you know, at that point, you've now lost that student's trust the next time you tell them to eat something because like you betrayed them. But when you give them things like, you know, ants or beetles or grasshoppers, and you know, people in our society are just not used to that. You know, it does not look like it came from a grocery store.
There's a little hang up in my mind. I feel like a worm would be easy because I'd swallow that full whole. Yeah. But cricket, you're not swallowing a cricket whole because it's gonna be clinging on.
Yeah. You gotta tear.
You gotta bite that
legs off.
I'll tear legs off and swallow.
Because the legs have the little like spikes on them, and you don't want that getting caught. And then, you know, scorpions, snakes, all that stuff. Some beetles just taste straight like we go to the desert for training, and there's just these little black sand beetles running around, and we're all old enough to where you've probably touched a 9-volt battery to your tongue.
Yeah.
Right. It tastes like that.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. But you're like, oh, there's a 1/4 gram of protein in this.
Yep, doing it.
I just got to eat 100 of them.
Right, exactly. You go and you fill your patrol cap with it, and you're just like, oh, this is terrible.
Bottoms up.
Yeah. We could have some, did you bring any crickets by chance? We could.
I don't want to
bust this out, right? You would do it.
I would do it if we're all doing it. I'm going to do it, of course.
I mean, I can surprise you guys with all kinds of fun stuff later.
Yeah. Just.
Well, it's funny, and you said that the hope is that they never use any of the skills that you guys taught them, but I feel like the character building that occurs in a school like that, they'll use for the rest of their life. Because the military in general, you get rid of a lot of inhibitions or, you know, preconceived notions about I need 9 hours of sleep or 8 hours of sleep, like a lot of kids do coming out of high school. Then you endure some of the stuff in the military, and you're like, oh, I can function perfectly if I have 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Not for prolonged periods, but
Yeah. It's just cop life, and then you just
Yes.
pound energy drinks
Right.
all day.
Oh,
Totally
yeah.
healthy.
And
Nicotine, caffeine, let's go.
the average school, or, as far as air crew is concerned, like, and I'm not talking about the SERE guys like me. So the air crew that comes in, anybody that's basically high risk of isolation. So all of the combat airmen come through. We also get Navy guys and Army Rangers.
I was going to ask that. I'm pretty sure you guys do.
Yeah, because the Air Force is the only branch with their dedicated survival school. They're only like as a career field. Army, Navy, Marines, it's like a special duty for them. They'll show up and do it for a little while, but then they'll go back to being a crew chief, a submariner,
It's a qualification.
Right. For the Air Force, you take that 18, 19-year-old kid straight out of high school, that guy is now 18, 19 years old, and will have, say, $18 million worth of human life that he's in charge of. So, and I put a dollar value because of the training, the Air Force puts into those people or the other branches. That kid's 18, 19 years old and now has that responsibility for their complete safety. Trains them on their own. There's nobody watching, like, over shoulder. They've gone through that process, kind of like a probational period where they have a trainer that oversees their certification. But once they're blessed, once they're knighted, they're 19 years old and running around out there doing all of the training, meeting all of the needs, hitting all the academic requirements, like, on their own, and making decisions for, most likely, everybody there outranks him.
Of course.
Because you're talking, the majority of them are pilots and air crew. You get some other air crew that are enlisted, junior enlisted, but you've got a 19-year-old telling a flight surgeon what to do. You will do this, and the flight surgeon's like, oh, I'm not going to do that. And he's like, yeah, you are. And this is a E2, E3, 18, 19-year-old kid telling them what to do. So they get a lot of responsibility really early compared to, going back to when I was a bomb builder as a E1, E2, like, I was like dusting stuff off, checking books off, going to my NCO or my sergeant and kind of like, being like there right underneath their little wing. And I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do now? And they were just basically telling me what to do. And then, of course, you lose that through progression, as you progress through ranks. But with the SERE community, it's like, okay, cool, you graduated school. Okay, we're going to watch you for a couple months just to make sure you're legit and you can do the job on your own. We're going to spy on you, basically. You have someone sitting in the back of the room with a notebook judging you the entire time. And then once you're blessed and you're off on your own, or they call it certified, once you're certified, you're completely on your own, 18, 19 years old, and running these crews, teaching them in a classroom setting, teaching them in the field environment, and then they kind of combine whenever the resistance training happens. You have resistance instructors, and then our field instructors kind of blend together. But yeah, it's...
Do you guys have any like recent real world examples of someone utilizing the skills that they were taught? Has that happened lately?
I think, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of hate for this, for not remembering everything. But I've been out for 8 years.
I feel like you have a good, like,
so
you've had a good TBI. I feel like you have a good excuse if you forgot something, right?
Yes. Yeah. The last name that I can remember teaching was Scott O'Grady. So he was an Air Force, or he was a Navy pilot, and they made a movie, The Behind Enemy Lines.
I was going to say that name is very familiar. Okay.
Yeah. So he actually came back, like, when he was going through, there's like a debrief that you go through when you come back from being behind enemy lines. And he said, I could not have done this without my SERE training. Like, so I think that's the most recent event that I can remember that would be famous or known, that someone said specifically the word my SERE training, because we teach the communication, we teach the hiding and the evasion portion that they really focused on in that movie. And of course that was a lot of Hollywood stuff thrown in there. But when you look at the basics, he was literally just, run, shoot, communicate, that's kind of like what he was doing the whole time. And that's what we really focus on during our training, because is it really that important that they know how to build a fire or shelter? Chances are, if you're running from the bad guys, you're not going to build a fire or shelter anyway. We want you to know how to navigate and use whatever survival equipment you may have on you. But evasion, navigation, and communication is probably the most important things that we really focus on. Because we spend a lot of time teaching radio stuff. Because, I mean, our average time, and this was when I was still active duty, was our guys are on the ground less than 6 hours. So something happens, helicopter crash, plane crash, IED on a convoy. Within 6 hours, you're back on U.S. property.
Yeah, so you don't really need to worry about food.
Right. So, yeah,
Maybe
a lot
not
of
even
that
water,
stuff is, a lot of that stuff is either old information or just good, that, kind of the foundation of what we want you to teach or what we teach, but there's been plenty of other guys like the lone survivor. We, like the U.S. Air Force SERE School, did not teach them. That guy's a SEAL, so he had SERE training, but from Navy guys. But we talk about that, like the cultural aspects, because Marcus Luttrell was held safe by the Pashtun Wale culture, where that guy was like, it's my culture, it's my beliefs, I have to protect you now and help you and aid, like no matter what, even when the Taliban was trying to get him out. So we teach a lot of those cultural things that we could use to our advantage, and the government itself, our government has like reward systems in place, and rewards is probably not the right word, but it's we carry a document on us that, say we're over in Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever we are, and you get the goat herder, the sheep herder, and you're like, hey man, take this paper to a base, to the military, and show them, and it's like proof, like there's almost no way to forge this document based on what it's made out of and everything. And they were like, okay, cool, you helped us out, we will give you something, give you a giant herd of goats, give you more land, give you money. There are situations that we've taught over the years where people have been granted citizenship. It just kind of depends on how much they help and how valuable it is.
Well, and how much they jeopardize their lives by doing it.
Right.
Because some of them, where you're talking citizenship, there's no way they can go back.
And we don't want to assign like a dollar value, because we're like, oh, hey, we'll give you $10 million because now you've just turned it into like almost like a ransom thing.
Right.
Yeah. Now like Americans are each are $10 million each. So, so it's just something we try to teach our guys that go down range, that to take advantage of these cultural things as well. And then, like I said, we have documents that they can hand to someone or give them a number that's on the document. And then those people bring that number in. So it kind of also validates it, as opposed to, say, you just have like an indig person walks up to the front gate of Bagram and it's like, hey, I've got an American here. Okay, it's kind of sketchy. Prove it.
Yeah.
Like, how do I know? How do I know you're not just bringing us to a trap?
Right.
So it's kind of designed to help offset that too, so that when they either receive this document or this number, then the American forces will be like, okay, this isn't made up. This is hopefully not a trap. They're still going to go in gun blazing and not trust anything. Sure. And even when they pick you up, like unless it's literally your best friend that's picking you up, you're going to be zip tied. You're going to be, if necessary, bagged and held until they can positively ID you.
Right.
Because if you've been over there, just depends on the situation. You could be all roughed up, dirty, not in uniform anymore.
Beard.
Right, exactly.
Shaggy.
So they're just going to try to identify you as soon as possible before they're super friendly with you.
Yeah. Can we talk about, because you deployed as well. Can we dive into that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I have 7 deployments over my career, over my 18 years. Not all of them into combat zones. Some of them into countries like Africa, and been to Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, like, a lot of Russian fallout countries. But a couple of deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. So I have more than one to each country in combat zones. And that's where I received a lot of, I guess, my fun and experience. You know? And
what's the role of a SERE specialist when you're in a combat zone?
Sure. So it differs at each location because we wear many hats. But generally it's PR, personnel recovery. So you can work in like a command center or a JPRC, a Joint Personnel Recovery Center, and you're working in a room. It might be something you've seen on TV before, where you've got a room kind of looks like a NASA control center. TVs are everywhere. They're up on satellites. You've got Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, whatever civilian 3-letter agencies might be over there. They're all in the same room. And that way, when you have a Navy pilot, an Air Force pilot, Army helicopter, whatever the case may be, we can all communicate because generally the SERE guy in the room is going to know exactly what survival equipment is on each aircraft. Local training is going to take place. So you'll have local area survival, local flora and fauna. They'll talk about terrain, and they'll come up with emergency plans together. So that SERE guy will generally talk to all of those cats that are over there and be like, this is your emergency plan. So then that way, if something does go down, a helicopter crash happens, they can be like, okay, SERE guy's going to pull up that guy's emergency plan. And obviously, all plans are great until you get punched in the face, right? So you come up with that plan of, okay, I crashed here. My objective is I'm going to run to the east because maybe that's a friendly border, or it's a giant mountain range that could put time, distance, and barriers in between you and the bad guys. But what if you crashed somewhere else? Or what if you crashed on the east side of this mountain range and now there are no mountains? So the SERE guy may have to kind of like throw an audible and be like, okay, well, based on what I've taught this person, or based on things we've discussed, he or she probably went this way. He or she has this much equipment in their aircraft, and you obviously have to look at like enemy locations as well. Where's the enemy? Where's borders? So generally that's what happens is a SERE specialist is there as a SME, subject matter expert of recovery. There are other cases where SERE guys are read into stuff where they get their clearance increased and they may be tasked to a rescue unit and they're, fifth, sixth in line with combat controllers, pararescuemen, some JSOC guys, the SERE guys way in the back. But it could be for terrain and navigation expertise. It could be for maybe finding someone, like proof of life, human tracking, things like that. So there's a lot of roles they fill in that combat situation. Generally, it's a personnel recovery thing, and it's still a lot of instruction. But if you get tasked to a certain unit, and that's a small percentage of the guys, they'll get tasked to a certain unit, and then they're loading up and kitting up every day with a bunch of door kickers and JSOC guys to be there as a support entity.
Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
Okay.
And because I was down at headquarters special operations, so I got to get into those fun gigs. Yeah. And, again, you're way back in line. You're not the front of the door, not the door kicker. But you're there as a support. You're there to provide any help or intelligence. Sometimes we would have to try to find somebody or find some type of proof of life, and you're, again, going off of what you may have trained guys to do, to hide DNA in certain rooms, like if you were captured or things like that. So you might be going through just looking for that proof of life.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Like if you went to building A and it's empty, So you might have to try to find something in there that shows like, okay, we told them to do this. And okay, now you found it. Now the other guys that you're there with, you know, they're not going to know that information because it's not part of that emergency plan that you helped them develop.
Right.
But yeah, and you're just there as a support guy mostly. Not a lot of days of, you know, putting all your gear on and going out. Most of the time it's weightlifting, working out, video games, watching movies, you know.
Sounds like being a firefighter.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
Hang on, the submariner in me is still chuckling about make sure you leave DNA behind. What
I
portion of the
my
training?
mind went there, and I was like,
it's proof, you know, whatever you can do.
Hey,
Yeah, that's
feed
what
the
I was-
geese to make sure we know that you're there.
that's
You
what
were
I
here,
was
all right?
doing.
If you have that kind of time, I guess, in that environment.
Yeah.
Can you?
I don't know, it might be a little dehydrated. It'd be more challenging.
Well, there's a funny meme, or I can't forget what they're called all now. They changed it as a GIF, it's a meme, it's a video. There's a guy talking about kind of like that comedian used to do, like you might be a redneck.
Yeah.
You've done
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z. There was I believe he's a veteran comedian, and he was talking about, he's like, you might be a veteran if you've ever masturbated in a 115-degree porta potty, you know, in Afghanistan. And if you're like, okay.
It seems like a good time.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Necessity.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
week one, that's not happening. You know, by 4 months in, you're like, yeah, I'm unstoppable.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, nothing phases you
Yes.
anymore.
Nothing turns me off right,
Right.
now. All right.
Exactly.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
The drawing on the wall of the porta potty that some dude did with a Sharpie is all
Yes.
you need.
Yep.
exactly.
All you
Exactly.
need.
Stick figures, dude.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes.
Can we get in the story of how you got hurt? And
Sure.
I only ask it because I think it leads into what you're doing now.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's see. This would have been 2009. So 2009, I was out with my guys, and it was just in a, you know, like stuff you're not prepared for. You know, it's IEDs that happen. I was not in direct contact with the IED, but my vehicle got the extra concussion and blast from it. So I was second vehicle back, and I got thrown into my radio tower that was kind of like in our center console. So it's not like our vehicles here, you know, we've got tons of big metal cages and radio equipment in the center. So the explosion happened. I got thrown into it. It broke my whole left side, broke my collarbone into 4 pieces, broke my shoulder blade in half, 2 twisted ribs. I have a pin in my hip, dislocated my ankle. My hearing's pretty bad. I was unconscious for 3 days because I ended up getting like a bunch of brain trauma from it.
I would imagine. I mean, the impacts, the explosion's enough to throw you, and you're in the vehicle,
I'm
throw
in the
you
vehicle.
in.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, we got like squished like a Red Bull can. You know.
Do you have any recollection of it, of the event, or is it just like body shock? And
I have flashes of like cold tables, like
Right.
being like woken up or being put on like a Skedco, which is like a litter, but you can roll it up. It's like plastic. So instead of carrying like a huge frame, like a surfboard or like a basket, like a Coast Guard would carry, we carry these things called Skedcos that they roll up like a sleeping pad, but they're hard, like HD PE plastic, and they just have nylon webbing that weaves throughout the whole thing. You tighten the webbing in, and then it goes from being flat to kind of
rigid.
It makes the edges rigid, and there's carrying handles, and you can put a Coast Guard fixed point up top, you know, to be hoisted.
Yep.
But we put all of our guys, you know, I was unconscious, but they took care of me.
How many people were injured in that?
I think we had 4 or 5 guys injured, and then 2 guys died. The one that was in the primary vehicle, and that's the hard part, because then you're like, what if we would have been switched?
There's a lot of
It's
questions.
so much randomness.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
so much. You look back in like guilt, and you know, like the survival guilt's like a real thing. You know, like, so I got hurt there, and then I got flown to, we were right outside Bagram. I got taken to Bagram. This all happened, of course, I'm unconscious. And then I got flown to Germany, Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany. And then I woke up 3 days later. But I do remember like bits and pieces of like cold tables. I remember like extreme pain where somebody was like trying to stretch my arm out because I think like naturally my body was trying to protect itself because I was hurt. And then I just, like out of a weird movie, I remember someone pulling my arm and I just snapped up on the table and was like, and I screamed. And then I just fell right back out. And that's about all I remember. Then I woke up in the hospital at Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany. And I was just, for lack of a better word, just sad.
How weird is that you woke up in a completely different country?
Oh, yeah, super weird. Because what I remember besides those few brief moments is I'm just sitting in a vehicle. I went from sitting in a vehicle to laying on a table.
I was going to ask, did you even have time to process that there was an explosion? Like, was it?
Oh, no.
It was just immediate, and that was.
I think our bodies are amazing, and I think my brain literally just turned the switch off.
Right.
Where I was just, whatever happened to me, in that moment was to the point where it was too much.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a circuit breaker in your house. I blew the circuit.
That's a good way to look at it.
And then my buddy next to me, he ended up getting brain damage. He was kind of the IED was on the right side. I was in the right side passenger seat. He was in the driver. So we had a bit more metal protecting him. But the blast, however it worked, I know nothing about acoustics or blast and sound waves, none of that. But it scrambled his brain more than like the physical part that I got. He ended up and he's a combat controller. He ended up like having to learn how to like talk again and just walk. Like there wasn't really anything wrong with his body per se, not like smashed broken bones or anything like that, or no spinal cord injuries that were, he didn't know how to use his legs. It was just like his brain just, didn't know how to do it anymore.
That schematic for that particular, movement was gone. Yeah. Like it just got wiped.
The signal
Yeah.
that was being sent out for him to be, because he was a badass dude. He's a combat controller. Mm-hmm. Super fit, could do anything, and then was brought home to sit in a hospital for 6 months of learning how to use his limbs again.
Has he recovered since
then?
then?
Yeah, he's recovered.
Yeah, good.
And it's just so strange, that all of that stuff, every one of us was injured differently. Mm-hmm. But, one of the things I learned through like therapy and stuff is that it doesn't really matter what your pain and injury is. It's all the same thing. Like, and I don't want to speak for like all of vets, but it's like we were just harmed by different things, but we're all experiencing pain and we can all relate because, just like law enforcement and other branches of service, you usually feel more comfortable around other law enforcement, other vets, because there's something that we've all gone through that general population doesn't, and probably the closest thing that I would say like a civilian has might be like a sports team. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Camaraderie. Yeah. Hey, you're a little twisted, messed up. Me too, bro.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's something you identify with. So that injury kind of, and I had 2 spinal cord injuries from it as well. C6, C7, L4, L5 for me. I have what they call stenosis, where my vertebrae have shifted. So the canal is kind of off-centered, and so my nerves get pinched a lot. So I've gone from, and I have lung disease as well from the whole thing, from inhaling like the burning chemicals while I was unconscious. Oh. So there's all these things that came from it, but I wasn't out of the fight. I got better. I went back to, return to the United States. And then when I came back, they were like, okay, dude, you're done. We're going to kind of put you out to pasture for a little bit, and then I came back up here and I just became a schoolhouse instructor just working with all my old buddies that I've deployed with. So it's kind of like a natural progression anyway. You go out, you do things, you go to all these other bases, and then when you get later or long on the tooth in the career, then they bring you back here because now you're senior leadership for all the young guys that are coming in.
Right.
So I just came back here, and that was in 2010. Came back up here in Spokane at the time, and then just became a schoolhouse instructor or cadre, and just started doing that the whole time. And then just, I'd say, so I got hurt in 2009, 2015-ish. I started having problems breathing, doing like our PT marches and runs and things like that. Of course, you go to the doc. It's like, oh, you have allergies. Here's some Claritin. Here's some Motrin. And I'm like, okay, like I'm definitely one of those meatheads that never questions the medics. Like whenever they're like, this is what's wrong with you, I'm like, okay, sure. I just want to go back to work. I don't want to be a guy that's on a profile and can't work.
Right.
Because that means all my other guys have to work harder. But I just kept going, and then breathing became more and more difficult. And on like a 10-mile run one day, I just passed out. While I was running, I was talking to my buddy that's standing next to me while we're jogging. We're having a conversation while we're running. And he told me, he's like, looked around, and I was back there laying on the road.
Shit.
And ambulance came to get me, and they took me to the hospital, and I did a pulmonary function test. And they were like, you need to go to Seattle now. So I got orders to fly over to Army Madigan. Was it Madigan? I can't remember the name of the hospital there in Tacoma. Madigan Army Medical Center. I think that might be the name, but I could also be screwing it up because it's an Army hospital. So, but it's a huge hospital compared to what we have around here. It'd be like equivalent to like Sacred Heart. So I flew there, spent a couple of days with a respiratory therapist and pulmonologist. And he's like, okay, yeah, man, you have severe obstructive lung disease. And I was like, cool. All right, just give me the shot, fix it. And he's like, no, there's no fix for this. We're actually going to med board you out. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? And he goes, yeah, you can't be in the military with this. Like the medication I have to give you to help you, it's like blacklisted by the government to allow me to be active duty. And I was like, okay, never mind. I don't want it.
I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm good. Give me some Tylenol, And they're like, no, we can't do it. We know about it now. And I was like, okay. So we, at this point I come back, talk to my leadership, and they're like, we'll just put you at a desk job. You're 18 years in. We'll just let you retire. I was like, okay, sweet. Didn't happen. Made it all the way to Pentagon, because of being battlefield airmen, you get extra pays and extra incentives. We're parachutists. I was not a diver, but there's guys that are dive qualified, and so you get extra pay for all of these certs that you keep. And the Pentagon was like, why are we paying this guy high-speed money if he's just going to sit behind a desk?
Wow.
Let's replace him with an 18-year-old that
cheaper
can do all of those things.
All about dollars and cents.
What year was this?
That was 2018. So I've not really fight the med board. I really drug my feet because they give you appointments. They're like, oh, you got to make it to this appointment to get checked out. And I'm like, okay, yeah, right. And I would miss my appointment.
Until you get yelled at.
Right.
Yeah, until you get...
Yeah. So then your commander's yelling at you because you missed an appointment. Yeah. And then your first shirt's now driving you to the next appointment, So there's only so much dragging I could do to try to get closer and closer to 20.
Right.
It takes that to turn you into a shitbag.
Right, exactly.
You're like, no, you're not booting me out.
Yeah, and then, then your buddies and your coworkers are all like, hey, what's wrong with Henry? Why can't he go to the woods? Why can't he do this? Why can't he jump anymore?
Right, that sucks.
And your true friends really stick out then, because then everybody else kind of starts to ostracize you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because the lungs were my issue, that the Air Force was booting me out. All my back stuff and everything else, all my surgeries, I was just taking Motrin and whatever pills I could get from the docs to just keep working. Mm-hmm. And all of us were in pain. That's just normal. Just like you guys sitting in all of your kit, sitting in a patrol vehicle for hours or running and jumping over stuff. Your body's always in pain, but you're just used to it, or you just know that's just part of the gig.
That's life now.
You're right.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I got medically retired at 18 years in, and what that means is that I lost my actual Air Force retirement because congressional law, you have to serve 20 years to get your retirement. Unless you're someone that was injured in direct combat. You know, you say like you have like amputees, you know, a lot of other veterans that get hurt really bad overseas. They're medically retired straight from country, so they get their retirement. But I came back and worked an extra 9 years.
Oh.
So had that happened while you were in country from the original, which you could have.
Right. If I would have just said, yeah, I'm done in 2009, I would have been retired at the pay grade I was at, you know, in 2009. Right. But I was like, oh, I'm still in the fight. I can still keep doing this.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people that wanted to stay in until they dragged me out, you know, because I was like, oh, I'm going to be a 30-year enlisted guy, you know, hopefully E9 chief someday.
Right.
And then that didn't happen. So I became extremely angry, bitter, depressed, changed my phone number, like totally lost contact with like all my buddies because I didn't feel I was like as good as them. You know what I mean? Like, why would they want to hang around me? Because now that I'm on all this medication, I've started going to the doctors to try to get work for my spinal cord injuries, which I don't know if any of you guys have ever done that, but it actually makes things worse. So I went into a wheelchair, you know, for a little bit. Then I went to arm crutches. And then, you know, I go back and forth to a cane. And then, I mean, then I got into the story of fitness.
Yeah, because you are not that person right now.
No.
I know you can't tell from the camera, but you're stud, dude. Like, how did you get there?
Well, that came from all of that depression and stuff. So I did.
So you didn't just drown it in a bottle?
No. Well, yes.
Yeah. Oh, for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, hey.
Not fully drowned.
Yeah.
Just,
yeah. So I had to get sober. I knew I had to. So during all of that stuff, the drinking and everything obviously got worse. And, you know, just feeling sorry for myself. Not a very good example, not a very good father. Right when I got sick, that's when I got divorced from my first wife because I became super focused on trying to fight all of that stuff, trying to prove I could work. My family life went to the side. You know, plus when you're in a high operations tempo environment anyway, you're pretty much going to get divorced anyway. But I think at that point I was already on thin ice, you know, with my ex-wife, my daughter's mom, and that just pushed it over the edge. So we got divorced. So then my health was declining. I just got divorced. I know I'm being med boarded out. It was just all, you know, and all those things happening at once. And I know there's millions of people out there that have it way worse. I'm complaining about first world problems, you know, living in our country.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's
And
a lot.
So I went through all of this, went through this depression. Now that I'm out, now you can talk to mental health, you know, because when you're in, you don't want to talk to mental health providers because
It'll DQ you.
right, you lose your security clearance, you no longer carrying a weapon, you might be put on some kind of crazy suicide watch, you know, you're basically answering phones, you know, and now guys may or may not trust you anymore. Leadership's like, oh, well, we don't want to give this assignment to this guy because he's depressed or he's jacked up. You know,
Because he admitted this chapter in his life is challenging, right?
It was frowned
The
upon
stigma,
for sure, you know, and I had buddies that would go downtown and pay out of their pocket for stuff.
Right.
I've seen the exact same thing in law enforcement.
Yeah, even if it was not, say, mental health, if it was like their back or something, they would start going to doctors, paying cash.
So it wouldn't be a
So
part
it
of the
wouldn't be a
record.
part of their record.
Yep.
And, you know, so I struggled through that, being completely ignorant of emotions, feelings, everything, just being a dumb guy. You know, I would say not very emotionally intelligent whatsoever. And then I started working with multiple doctors, trying different like we talked about, like everything you see on Pinterest.
Yep.
You know, I'm going to do lemon juice. I'm going to do sunshine. I'm going to do red light. I'm going to do, you know, this.
Grounding.
Yeah. I'm going to take my socks off and, you know, stand in my front yard.
Yeah.
You know, all of these things.
You got to get sun on your butthole. I've heard that's what Big John says.
That's the thing.
Very good for you.
Was that after the flat Earth conversation?
Yeah.
That's the key.
Apparently that's the key. The logistics of it are
Is
rather
that
difficult.
where the vitamin D goes?
I think so.
Oh, that sounds like a Navy.
I knew it. I knew it was coming. There's the Navy joke. That's it.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like that.
I'm gonna explain that to your spouse.
What are you doing? I mean,
hey, you should think about this. It's really good for you. Vitamin D on your butthole.
I mean, it might be all right as long as you don't have like a 2-story house around you.
Yeah,
that's the challenge,
Yeah, that's
right?
fair.
Yeah, you
see
gotta
your
be careful
backyard.
where you live. Yeah,
I'm just gonna lay up on my roof.
Yeah,
you know,
there
they
you
can
go.
just take it.
spread those cheeks.
Yeah, for sure.
So how did you find CrossFit? Is that the one thing that?
Well, CrossFit, I would say, was the second step. The first step was actually getting help, mental health wise.
Yeah.
Because I spiraled a bit. You know, like I said, deleted my number. Didn't talk to any of my old coworkers. Like some of my coworkers thought I was dead already, and I left Spokane, moved to Tri-Cities. I was chasing a job down there, and then I just decided I like being retired. You know, or as retired as I could be, because go into a job and when you're all pissed off, upset, half drunk and everything, didn't work out anyway.
No, it doesn't work out.
Right.
Usually, yeah.
So I went down there just to kind of get away from everything that I knew. Like nobody knew that I was broken or depressed or any of that down there. Plus it was a little bit warmer. So I moved down there, still going through the mental health things. And then I just reached a point where I was like, okay, I have a plan. I'm putting all my documents in a manila folder in my nightstand. This is all my life insurance. This is my will. This is everything. Like, I was at the point where I was developing a plan to kill myself. And I can tell you, not exactly the date, but I can tell you the moment where either my daughter saved me or God spoke through my daughter. And that's what saved me. Because I was literally at the very end. I wanted to see my daughter one last time, hung out with her. And I remember, like, my plan was to go straight from dropping her off to going out into the middle of nowhere, because being a SERE guy, I know where the points on maps are, where chances are no one's ever going to go. You know, or by the time somebody walks to that exact spot, the wolves and everything else will take care of it. So I'll already be gone. And I had my daughter in the truck, and I was driving her back to her mom's. And I think she was, so that would have been 2019. She was 8 at the time. And some very mature words came, like she's still in like a car seat, like small. She's sitting in the back, and she just tells me, she's like, Daddy, I wish you were healthy again. And I was like, okay, yeah, well, I'm sorry I'm not, you know, and I don't know what to tell her. I'm like thinking she's talking about, you know, my lungs or something like that. And she's like, no, I wish you were healthy. I missed it, like when we would go eat berries in the woods and when you would exercise more and we would go fishing. And, you know, she just listed things that she wanted to do with me more. And then at some point in the truck ride, she's just like, Daddy, I want you to start going to a gym again because I love you and I miss you.
Oh.
And I was just like, yeah, right. I was just like, what's happening right now? Like, this isn't how she talks, you know? And it really caused me to second guess what I was doing. Because before, I'm thinking she's just a little kid. She'll be fine. She's happy. You know, she just wants cartoons and dogs and animals and, you know, just to be happy wearing sundresses. And she'll has a new stepdad, you know, she'll be fine. She doesn't need me. But then she had this conversation with me, and it was a very mature conversation that I've never heard her quite speak at that point in her life. And it really caused me to second guess what I was doing. So I got on the crisis line for the veterans. called the Veteran Crisis Line. And that whole process leads me to where I'm going later. But they're like, yeah, we're full. We don't have anywhere for you. You could go somewhere else. We'll call you. We'll talk to you. We'll check you in. Like check in on you. And I was like, no. I was like I need help right now. Like I literally have my gun on my hip, and I have a map. Like I'm ready. And they're just like, oh yeah, sorry. Well, we'll just stay on the phone with you. Let me have somebody else call you in a couple minutes. And I'm like, I need to go to a facility like where they're going to take everything away from me. And they're like, yeah, we're full, but we have a wait list. If you wait a little while, you can come here, or we can send you like somewhere else. They were going to send me to like a different state. And I was like, no, I really want to be close to my daughter because you can have visitors and stuff. And so anyway, that didn't happen. As far as the crisis line and the VA hooking me up right away. So I ended up just Googling like inpatient facilities. I'm sitting in my truck. I just dropped my daughter off. I called this place in Edmonds, Washington, called the Center, I think it was. Civilian hospital, $25,000 for a month, and I just have normal TRICARE insurance, and I was like, wow, okay, I can't really swing this. And then I got on the phone and I called USAA, and I have no medical coverage at all. Like I didn't carry any kind like house insurance, car insurance. Called them. It's like, hey, what can I do? Is there any kind of insurance I can buy? And they're like, well, you've been with us for 18 years. We have additional coverages you can buy for this. And like, we're going to cover 50%. And I didn't even know it was like a thing. Mm-hmm. They're like, yeah, we're just going to take care of it. And I was like, wow, you're my car insurance company. Like I was literally just grasping at straws.
Yeah.
And just calling everywhere I could. And they took care of it. I paid for the other half of it. And I ended up going to this civilian center for 30 days. And then I transitioned straight from there into American Lake, which is the VA facility over in Tacoma. Mm. So long story short, I spent 60 days in inpatient care, medication, all different types of therapy, from golf, sweat lodges, group counseling, one-on-one counseling, exposure therapy, like all of the things. And it truly changed who I was. Went sober because you can't drink. I mean, it was literally like, I don't want to say like a prison, but it's like you're on lockdown. You take a breathalyzer every time you enter the building. You're a random drug test. You're in a room. The room particularly that I was in, I had 3 other guys in there. And every 4 hours, they'll come in and literally put their hands on your head to make sure you're still there, like you didn't escape or leave.
Yeah.
So in like those kind of things is where it kind of felt like a prison to me. You have like a cafeteria for lunch and you have to be in certain places. So I was like, wow, this is pretty tight, controlled.
Structured.
But yeah, very structured. But I was in there with guys from homeless vets, addiction problems, alcoholism. I mean, it could be anything. So there were so many different stories I heard. And I was probably like most people, sat there with my arms crossed. I don't belong here. This isn't right for me, kind of a thing. And one of the counselors must have just looked into my file enough and found out how to get to me. And, I lost my parents when I was young. So the counselor just comes up, puts her hand on my knee, and she's like, would your dad be proud of where you are right now? Kind of took the gloves off and really tried to go for my heartstrings. And I broke down. The walls came down. I broke down, and then other people in the room were crying because I was crying, and I was like, this is weird. Like, I don't like any of this.
Yeah.
But
I'm a dude. Right?
Yeah. I started like this, going pass, next. And then once they figured out how to break my walls down, and then I actually opened up to the therapy and then really learned a lot from it, it really helped. So I became a believer in that. And then I felt that was my first step to trying to get better, like my daughter asked me to be. And then when I came back, I found CrossFit, I had just had another surgery on my elbow at the time, and relocating nerves in my elbow. And I went into a couple of gyms, and they turned me away because I was hurt, and they were like, you have too many like things that are wrong with you. Like, this isn't for you. You need to go to like Planet Fitness and like just relax.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. But then I walked into another gym, and they really helped me. The owner was like, yeah, I'll just write some one-armed programs for you to do and things for you to work on, like with balance, or, because our muscles form like X's across our body. So my right side was hurt. So we're going to work on your left leg more because that will connect to your right side. That'll help with healing and blood flow and all of these things. And I was like, okay, cool. I know nothing about this stuff. Like, I know military PT, running, push-ups, sit-ups, carrying heavy shit, swimming.
If it sucks really bad, it's good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't puke, you didn't do a hard workout.
Hey.
And I heard that stuff about CrossFit. I've done like CrossFit type movements.
Yeah.
But never with like the clock and the names that they have for these workouts in like a classroom setting. So I got into it, started to feel a little better. You get the good serotonin and stuff flowing in your brain. Plus, you get a little bit of competitiveness again. You feel a little bit more of that community and that camaraderie that is the end goal for all of this. And I was like, okay, cool. This is kind of nice. I enjoy this. Plus, as a caveman, as a dumb animal, when you start lifting heavy stuff, you kind of feel better.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, now I'm more of a man again. As silly as that sounds, that's a thing.
Yep.
And so I was building my house in Post Falls at the time, and then I moved out here, so I didn't go to the first gym I found. I found Black Goat Fitness. They're right in Post Falls off of Spokane Street and 3rd. Never heard of it because it's kind of hidden, the location itself. Never heard of it. Ran into people at a class, and they're like, oh, you should come to this gym. Came to the gym, super friendly, totally different environment from my first gym. My first gym was a little bit of more military, a little bit more cops. So it was kind of that we're picking on you type of thing.
Yep.
Like, if you don't lift this weight, you're a pussy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. And so I was pushing myself a lot further. Turns out that wasn't good for me.
Yep.
I got into Black Goat, and the coaches were like, we're happy you're here. Do what you feel comfortable with today. I was like, wait, what? Where do we write the board? Like, where's the board with all of our scores so I can see what Seth did earlier so I can beat him.
Yeah.
They're like, no, we're not really worried about that here. We're just happy that you're here. And then I gave the coach like my list of injuries, and they're like, okay, well, take care of your body, do this and do that. And, I've looked back on this coach in particular. Her name's Naomi. I'll name drop her here. But I've literally think that she helped save my life.
Yeah.
Because I was in that transition period of coming in and out of the hospital, moving, having surgeries, which then, that kind of drops you down further because you're more helpless. You can't defend yourself. It doesn't really matter how much you know. If your arms and limbs are, you just had them operated on, you feel very weak,
right,
and vulnerable.
Right.
So the gym made me feel very welcome. I got into it. I loved the community that was there. I went from having like 2 or 3 buddies, from work and only surrounding myself with military guys and mostly being a hermit, like in my wood shop, to now I want to surround myself with as many people as I can.
Yeah, it's a funny shift, isn't it?
Yeah,
and I
mean, it didn't happen overnight. That took a couple of years, but it's the cup, your cup where we pour things out of and people fill our cup and we fill other people's cups. They were filling my cup so much that now I want to give to other people.
Right.
And my wife is a huge help with all of this because she's been the one that's kind of given me the courage and the support of, go do all of these things you want to do. Like, I don't care. I support you. Like, she's like, I can see the change in you of being grumpy and OCD and getting, mad when the salt shaker's not 1 inch over from where it's supposed to go, where a lot of those things I don't spend my energy on anymore. Now I'm spending my energy on, how we met.
Yep.
Trying to build a community.
Yep.
And that's what's really important to me. And I don't know if this is a really good segue or not, but it's like, now I'm trying to start a nonprofit, and I'm working with a friend of mine, John, that's starting a nonprofit mental health hospital here in Post Falls, or a mental health clinic. And I want to start a nonprofit to help vets where we raise money that helps offset the cost of things that they need for, like me, fitness really, quote unquote, saved me. It changed me from being in canes, crutches, wheelchair. I have a service dog that is mostly not a service dog anymore, because I don't need him. When I first got him, I really needed him. I couldn't walk through the park, down here. I couldn't go on those trails. Those rocks were too much for me without trekking poles or a cane or my dog. And now I can put a 45-pound ruck on and go hit those trails.
That's wild.
But it's because of, I would say, CrossFit, the community. Our gym isn't a CrossFit gym. It's a CrossFit. Everything we do is basically CrossFit mentality and style. We just don't have the branding.
Yeah. Are you, you mentioned you were rucking every week. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, we have a ruck this Saturday at 8:00 at the park for anybody that wants to join.
Where are you guys meeting?
Which park?
Chameleon or
Quemlin.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
However,
Yeah.
everybody says it.
You said that the first time. I was like, what the fuck park is that?
Yeah.
Oh, it's probably Quemlin Park. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't,
Quemlin.
especially no white man knows how to pronounce that.
Right.
But,
It's a difficult place to live for that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Is it Kootenai or Kootenai? Coeur d'Alene?
Yeah, exactly.
Coeur d'Alene? Whatever. It's tough,
Yeah,
dude.
I almost
get
have
that.
to Google how to spell Kootenai every time I'm filling out a form.
yes.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know how to.
are you guys out there every Saturday?
Not every Saturday. We're trying to figure out.
How can people figure out when you're doing it? Do you have a place?
My Instagram, I post it.
Okay. What's your Instagram handle?
Tim Henry 1947.
Okay.
So it's mostly CrossFit stuff that's on there, but I'll be switching over to the fundraiser, I guess the nonprofit. The name of it, I'm going through all the paperwork and stuff right now. I have to build a board and get the tax ID number and all of that stuff, and it's the foundation's going to be called Ruck to Rise.
Cool.
And the main purpose of it is to help offset the costs for veterans and first responders that need help. Primarily, hopefully, with fitness is going to be like where I'm going to concentrate it, but also the new mental health clinic that's going to be opened up here in Post Falls. That's going to be a nonprofit clinic. It won't be free for people that need help, but it's going to be super low because they are bringing doctors in. So it'll be super low cost and affordable. So maybe, I can do a couple rucks a year, a couple runs and things like that to help raise money. I don't expect this to be, millions of dollars, but if I can get enough money to help pay for a couple vets' mental health bill, to pay for them, like, okay, gym membership, maybe they need some help with other medical bills. Even if it's just, hey, come ruck with us. You need a ride.
Sometimes that's all you need is some time in nature.
Right.
And even if you're not talking, there's somebody next to you on both sides.
Yeah.
And you'll talk eventually.
Yeah.
But you don't have to.
And that's kind of the symbolism, I guess, behind the rucking part is, and I put it to test a few weeks ago when we did it the first time, it disarms everybody.
Yeah.
Because you're not focused on keeping your walls up. You're focused on breathing,
Yep.
A little bit of back pain that's kicking in, and, maybe your feet are hurting or something like that. You're having to look down to make sure you don't trip.
He made me do that the other day. It was a good time.
Yeah.
We hit, Eric and I, we were making a video about hikes around Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah.
So we hit Camfield and then Mineral Ridge and then Tubbs Hill, like back to back to back in the same day.
Oh,
Yeah,
Camfield's
that's a good
no
one.
joke.
yeah.
A trail one's a good one.
Yeah, it was a fucking grinder. Yeah. So we were pretty smoked. So that's what that look was for. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
But you're right. Like there's an ebb and flow of the energy when you're doing this. There's times when you're excited and talking and energetic, and then there's these other times when you're like very in your own head
Yeah.
and just focused on what you're doing in the moment.
Well, we're trying to keep them relatively short, and I would say like 3 to 5 miles.
That's
tops.
perfect.
Because
that's attainable.
Yeah, that's kids can, kids can do it, dogs can do it, and then if
Not
you
my
bring
dog.
not your dog. You bring somebody that's maybe not, in that great of shape or not experienced with it. The great thing about the Chameleon Park, however you want to say it. I'm from Pennsylvania originally, so maybe
too.
I just say it wrong.
I was born in Pennsylvania.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Hanover.
Easton.
That's up north, right?
I think so. Yeah, it's been a while.
And I'm down in like South Central below Harrisburg.
Okay.
And the rucking just disarms you a little bit, but I want to keep it obtainable and doable to the point where people can just show up and be like, okay, I don't want to commit my whole Saturday to this.
Yeah.
If I can ruck for an hour-ish, because we tested it out a few times, and, I put a 45-pound on, my wife has a 35-pound ruck, for the ladies, and we did 3 miles with 2 stops at the water, just to soak in a little bit of scenery, and then came back in an hour, because
that's perfect.
The trails aren't that bad over there.
Right.
You can choose a little bit more aggressive trail if you want to. But I think as far as getting people out there, but as soon as we started walking, everybody started talking. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the point, because I want to build something where we're all checking in with each other, because I don't want to go back to where I was. But I also, knowing what that's like, I also don't want anybody there, and if I can help, like we have a small church group that meets at the gym on Mondays at 6:30, and the guy that's running it, that's starting that mental health clinic, he was like, Tim, would you ever, think about it, pray on it, let me know. Would you ever be willing to come down and talk to vets at the mental health clinic? I was like, yeah, I don't need to think about it.
Yeah.
Put me on the schedule. Like, Good. I'll come talk, because I remember on that phone call when I wanted help, and they were like, oh, we're full, or we'll check back with you. If I can talk to somebody,
right.
like, I don't think that I'm anything special, but if I can just talk to a dude, I can bore him to death about my bees, or talk to him about gardening or CrossFit, That's
all they need. They need someone to listen. They don't necessarily need a doctor in that
right.
moment. They need a guy that they can relate to.
Right.
That's
yeah,
been
we can
there.
talk about,
right.
Military times. Yeah. Talk about stories about what menu can you remember of an MRE, which one comes with Skittles and which one has the lemon pound cake in it. Like you can remember all the menu numbers of how many MREs you've eaten in your whole life. And, it just distracts you.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great. And that's what I'm trying to really start with this whole thing. It went from CrossFit helping me become more physical and building muscles that are functional, like the gym, Black Coat Fitness, the whole thing is functional fitness. And I went from needing all of these apparatuses to help me walk, and my dog Zeus, and not being able to run. Like I would go for like a 1-block walk, and I would have to sit at whatever bench was there for, like a dog cleanup bag, station. Yeah. There'd be a bench there. I'd be like, okay, I got to take a break. I've just walked 3/4 of a mile. I'm not fast by any means. I'm 45 years old, but now I'm like, okay, I can run a 9-minute mile. Mm-hmm. Now, 20 years ago, it used to be like sub 6, but now I'm like, okay, I can run a mile. I can run 3 miles. I can lift X amount of weight, and I have bad days. Not every day is a great day. I was in the emergency room 2 weeks ago because I couldn't stand up. I was in the middle of a workout, but everybody, and that's the great thing, everybody in my community knows me. They might come over, be like, do you need anything? And it's sometimes you're just in that pain where you just can't talk to anybody. Yep. You're just like, leave me alone, but the offers were there. The help was there. Do you need me to go get your cane out of your truck? Do you need me to call your wife? And I'm just kind of laying on the ground, and they're just going about their gym business because they know that, like, okay, that's Tim. Oh, he's dead? He might be dead on the ground over there? Like, okay. We're just going to check to make sure he's breathing, and then we're going to go about it because Tim wants to sit there and try to figure it out. Or, maybe it's temporary. Maybe the feeling will come back, in his legs. And it didn't that day. My wife had to come get me. We had to go to the emergency room for 4 hours.
Shit.
They ended up giving me a bunch of shots and anti-inflammatories and stuff to bring down the inflammation on my back so that the signal could come back. And then 4 hours later, 4 hours of being in the emergency later, I hobbled out of the emergency room.
Wow.
So it's just about that not giving up part. I think fitness really helped me, and fitness really kind of saved me. And I went from, working out in the gym an hour a day. And then I learned last year there's actually adaptive competitions out there for, amputees, wheelchair athletes, nerve condition athletes. There's even blind. They have, as well as one of the ladies here locally, she helps run the, I'm going to mess it up, but it's the intellectual, that's what it's called, intellectual category. Mm-hmm. So as of right now, there's 16 different categories that this organization called WheelWOD recognizes and tries to let us do fitness so we can still compete. So you got wheelchair athletes lifting weights, like doing Olympic weightlifting. Mm-hmm. And then you have, amputees lifting. Then you have people like me with, with spinal cord injuries lifting. So things are modified for us so that I'm not competing against a perfectly healthy 23-year-old,
right?
And just getting destroyed. So last year I decided to try and test it out because I wanted, again, to see where I was at. I tested it out. I competed worldwide. I went to San Antonio, Texas and competed, and I got 10th in the world, in my division. So 44 years old at the time, 10th in the world in my division, and then you go back just 8 years and I could barely run, could barely walk.
That's awesome.
And I'm competing again this year, going to the CrossFit Games. I don't find out for another 10, 11 days if I made it because they have to review all of our videos and stuff. Mm-hmm. But if I make it again this year, then it's in Las Vegas this year. So I'll be competing again on a worldwide stage there. And I've decided already that I'm switching. This is more probably our wheelhouse for more fun gun stuff.
Yep.
Tactical games.
Awesome.
So I'm working with some local athletes here that have been doing it. I'm building new weapons down at, North Idaho Arms and trying to get more competition style stuff built. But it's, the tactical games is a combination of fitness and shooting. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking it's going to be easier on my body because of the stress that all the Olympic weightlifting and gymnastics type stuff really puts on my back and my shoulders and things like that. This is more like strongman type stuff.
Yeah.
Sandbags, running, and just shooting with a really high heart rate. So it's a test of fitness and a test of accuracy.
Yeah, cool.
But I'm trying to build all of these things by going on this worldwide stage, getting the name out there, because I want to use my platform of fitness to show this is where you can go. Mm-hmm. There's, just because we're broken, we're disabled, we're jacked up in the head with, TBIs, just because of all of these things doesn't mean we have to play Xbox, right, and eat Doritos and drink ourselves silly.
Yeah, you got a lot of good years left in you.
Yeah, and I want that healthy message to be passed on, not just to vets, but first responders in general.
Right.
I want to push that idea out, try to build this foundation, try to get people to either reach out to me or stop by the gym, because it doesn't matter how hurt you are. We can modify something. I don't care, if the athletes are in wheelchairs. I have dumbbells.
Yep.
Your upper body's going to be jacked.
Yep.
And I want to use, because I feel like I owe it to my friends that have either died overseas or the guys here, because one of my buddies just killed himself last year, and I've got another buddy that's on the fence, and he keeps doing the call thing every now and then.
Yeah.
Hey man, I'm in a dark place. I'm like, come on, dude, just go get help.
Yeah.
And I want all of the people that are in that place or in that position to realize that we can still do things. You know, our purpose isn't gone. It took me, I did not figure that out day one.
Right.
You know, I didn't retire and then figure out that my purpose is this now. It's taken me 8 years to kind of figure out that the life I have that I owe to my friends, you know, or the life that I need to live in honor of them should be good. Mm-hmm. You know, and by the grace of God, you know, I was saved for some reason, and I have the ability to get healthy-ish. So I need to do something with it.
Yeah.
I need to meet guys like you, go on Rucks, start a nonprofit, you know. I don't make any money. I don't have a job. So why not just spend all day trying to do something to build the community?
Yeah, and it's like you have to have that purpose. I think that's where a lot of guys that retire from being a cop, right?
Yeah.
On average, they die within 5 years because they don't have that purpose anymore.
Right.
And it's incredibly important. Man, you're doing some really good things with the community. So we got to wrap this up. We're getting long on time, but
just edit it all out to
no,
like 2 minutes of me talking.
No, that's really good. Like I've been quiet the whole time. I'm just listening to you, and I think a lot of people out there are going to be listening because it's relatable if you come from this background, and it's inspiring to see like where you come from. You know, we have our little complaints, and then we see, and I know you said like, oh, I'm nothing compared to these guys. Well, you're a lot compared to most people, dude. Like what you've gone through and the attitude that you have and where you've taken it. So it's inspiring, and I think people need to hear that. So thank you.
Well, and how you've like forgiven yourself for not living up to this image that you'd set for yourself before. I spend a lot of time talking to vets and cops, and I think where you get wrapped up is you assign all of your own internal value to your job and to your profession and to your position, and that's where it gets so hard when it falls.
Yeah.
And it falls, whether it's emotional or physical toll, it's going to fall, or mental.
Yeah.
It's going to fall at some point. It's the ability to go back and realize, hey, I can rebuild myself using those, just like we talked about with SERE, using those same traits and characteristics and rebuild myself in a different image and love that one just as much.
Yes.
So I think we're our own harshest critics and probably are.
Yeah.
You know, I say this with the kids coaching all the time. You are your biggest competition. You can either be your rise or your downfall.
Yeah.
So good on you. And then passing that on to the other ones out there that need to hear it.
Yeah. And however we can support, we are all about it, dude, because this is near and dear to our hearts.
Yeah, for
We've all lost friends and the whole thing, man. Like it's important.
Yeah. I just want people to come down to the gym, come on a ruck. Like it's all free. The rucks, I mean, obviously the rucks are free. You know, that's why I'm having to meet at the park versus like say meeting at the gym where, you know, it might get kind of gray. Like we're using gym equipment and they're not gym members. Well, we can go to the park, you know, and go for a walk, and maybe we'll rotate locations so it's easier. You know, I'm just trying to build. It's in its infancy, you know, all of this stuff that I'm trying to build. But I just want to be surrounded by good people, you know, hopefully like Christ-following people for the most part. But if not, then that's also my job to try to bring them in. You know, and it's just people that are willing to either listen, people that are willing to do some good work, because we need that. We need that hard work. You know, whether it's in the gym,
100%.
whether you know it's in the backyard, or just through the struggle of trying to get through an injury. You know, because for some people, going for a walk just with their own body weight, that's the hard work for that day. And let's do it. You know, you need me to come walk with you. You need to come meet with our group to come walk with us. You don't have to carry a ruck. You know, just bring a bottle of water.
That's perfect.
That's awesome.
I'll link your Instagram so people can jump on there and figure out when you're going to be rucking. But Tim Henry, thank you. Appreciate it, bro.
Thanks,
I'm glad to know you.
Yeah, same.